Hi, my name is Jamie, and I am a therapist, entrepreneur, mom, and podcast host. So excited to share a conversation with Pearl.
Hey everybody, it's Pearl Chiarenza, and welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Pearl. I'm so excited to have this conversation today with you guys because I think we're going to have some really cool, real conversations. So get out your cup of tea, get out a pen and paper. If you're driving, put us on loud so you can hear us over all the crazy noise that's going on around you. But my guest today is Jamie Vollmer, and she is a clinical therapist, entrepreneur, radio show host, and mom who bravely navigates life with anxiety and ADHD. Jamie focuses on supporting individuals who are grappling with emotional triggers, irritability, low self-esteem, and feelings of disconnection. How many of you guys are sitting there going, oh my God, I get that? Jamie empowers her clients to work through their past experiences and embrace the present moment. She utilizes eye movement desensitization and reprocessing EMDR to help her clients reclaim their lives. I'm so excited to have you on, Jamie, today because I didn't tell Jamie this, but we're going to talk about what you've been going through, girlfriend. But before we get there, let's tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Give us a little background on who you are and why you do what you do.
Oh God, that's a loaded question. Who I am. I'm a self-identified people pleaser in recovery and a trauma kid. I've been in therapy since I'm 8. So I went to school to become a therapist. And then I was like, the mental health, like nonprofit world is just a burnout cycle. And I didn't feel like I got the right education or training to really help my clients. I was just like, here, see all these people with all these different issues and figure it out. So I then ventured out, opened my own practice. I now have 2 group practices, one in Missouri and one in New York. My practice focuses on trauma because as I said, I'm a trauma kid. So we highly focus on eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is EMDR for short, which is the leading treatment for PTSD. And the first time that I experienced EMDR, I was in a training for it, and we practiced on each other in training. And I did it on infertility. So it was my second pregnancy. I had IVF with both my boys. And during my second pregnancy, I went for this training, and I was very nearly pregnant. It was like the first month. And all of these fears about my body failing me and just being inadequate as a woman and a mother, like just came like flooding up. And that's what I focused on in my training. And it was amazing, the difference in my headspace, like before and after, because I knew all those thoughts that were coming in my head weren't true. But what I say to my clients all the time, like before EMDR, it was like whack-a-mole. Like, okay, that's an untrue thought. We know it's untrue because of this. And then another, like, it's like a bunch of little protesters come up and just argue with you in your brain. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, Pearl. Am I just like super crazy, or do you get where I'm going? But with EMDR, it actually felt true in my body. And the difference with EMDR is that it removes that physicality. So all of the physical anxiety that came with all these thoughts, it wasn't there. So the thought would pop up, and it was much easier to be like, no, you got this. You already went through one pregnancy. You gave birth successfully. Your pregnancy was mostly healthy. You're only high risk because you're IVF. There's nothing to worry about. And it felt true for the first time in my life. And then I was like, cool, my whole team's training in this. And that's how I got where I am pretty much.
No, and you're not alone. I totally have been there, felt that, especially like over the last 18 months, I mean, growing up, I had trauma, as a kid, I had some things happen, but over the last 18 months with the loss of my son, like there's been like that first year, it's like that, like the shock of it all, right? Like that, oh my gosh, you feel like you're kind of walking around in a daze, and people are, you're doing this and doing that, kind of like a whack-a-mole doing things, right? But you're popping up here doing that. And then, now since it was a year ago in July, so we're hopping on 2 years, which, time flies, but it's like, I start going the acceptance, right? Accepting that, no, he's not going to walk in the door in a moment. Accepting that my younger son is getting married in October and he's not going to be there at that wedding. He's not going to have a wedding, right? All those things, like, those thoughts and everything. And to, what you're talking about, having that mental fitness, that's what I talk about too when I coach with my clients, with my women. It's like, those sabotaging and those judging thoughts that come in our head that we think are real, right? We so think those are real, whether it's like in my case, thinking, what could I have done differently? We talked to him 20 minutes before he passed. Maybe I should have just told him, stay where you're at and I'll come over there, all those different things. But, for me, I'm also gotten to the point in my life where I'm like, things happen in the journey they're supposed to happen. I never, to say they happen for a reason when you lose a child, there's no reason why I want my son gone, right? But people will tell me that, believe it or not. People say the craziest things, or he's in a better place. Well, what's better than being here with me? So those thoughts will come up, right? But what I think is what you said too is like, that, and you went back to people pleaser. Let's start there. We learn at a young age that people pleasing, I just went through, for those that are listening and have heard my story before, I've had a strict locked fence around my dad since like 2016. And as a daddy's girl, for my own self-care, but more for out of that mama bear that I am, for my son, Matthew, who is my son who we lost, he was our adopted son who was mixed race. And my dad, as my son came older and into becoming a young man, my dad, his races started showing up, which I never realized. I say I never realized it, but when I look back now as a little girl, I think I saw it and I just didn't realize it, right?
It didn't affect you. It didn't hit you the same way because back then it was like, those are just words, but now it's like, these words are affecting my child. And right. Development. And this affects how he sees himself. And if you're his grandparent and you see him this way, what do you think that's doing to his development? Don't talk to my kid that way.
Yeah. So I feel
like mama bear.
Yeah. So I literally locked a fence and he's not allowed. I mean, since my son's passed, he has said some things, not so nice things, went through a reach out to me. So, he's blocked and everything for me. And then fast forward last year, my mom's health has not been great. And my brother and I were trying to help her. And there was things that other family members were doing that were risking my own personal livelihood and risking my family. And she thought it was okay. So I was like, well, if that's the choice you're making, you're going to have a fence too. And people say to me, and I bring this up because we talked about the people pleaser. People say to me all the time, how can you not talk to your parents? How can you have that? And I look at them and I say, let me share it to you in a different way. If you were in a relationship and this person was treating you this gaslighting and narcissism that I'm accepting from my parents, would you want me to stay with that person? The answer is always no. Yeah. You don't want that. And so the people pleaser, as I went through the processes, because Jamie, when things happen to us, we're like, that judge and saboteur goes, what could I have done different? Was this my fault? I realized as a little girl, that's where my people pleasing started. My dad was in the service. My mom had to take care of all of us kids. God bless her. And so I, as a young girl, was babysitting my brother and sister in elementary school, so a people pleasing starts early.
It does. So, Pearl, I do this workshop that we offer for free. And the first day of it is literally talking about familial and societal messaging that we receive as kids, as women, right? And that to be a good, virtuous woman, then you must be selfless and you must give to other people and you must do all of these things, and how that affects our narrative, right? And even now in my life, I've talked on my show about how my family, if I ever say anything negative about my husband, and he's a wonderful man, he is, but he has problems too. He's not perfect either. If I ever say anything, they're like, you're so lucky that he, is essentially a dad to his children. And I'm like, no, that's expected. He doesn't get a pass on everything he does wrong because he's a dad to his kid. I'm expected to be a mom, but there's just such a gendering difference between male and female. And the kids are inherently in our society, our responsibility. And men can just walk away. And if we don't get it done, then we're bad moms. But if they don't get it done, well, it's not their responsibility. It's just this whole,
oh my gosh,
how we're socialized is really
and that's so generational, right? My mom was like that. My granny was like that. I'm sure my great grandmother, right? And so we have to change in those thoughts process. And for me, having two boys, I was very much, that was something, I knew they were going to marry women, and I knew I wanted to teach them that, just because I'm a female doesn't mean I have to do everything in the house. And my sister-in-law, if she's listening to this, I'll give a shout out to my sister-in-law, Melissa. I went to go visit her and my brother one time, and I talk about this on the show all the time. I tell her, I go, you better be listening because I talk about you. But I went to go visit her, and my nephew Sean was like 4 years old. He wasn't even in kindergarten. She's like, hey, come upstairs. Sean's got to put his clothes away. I'm like going, put his clothes away? Like at a young age, she said, I'm teaching him that this is a business of this house. So we're running the business together. And while he may not put his clothes away perfectly, he's learning the act of participating in a team. I was like, that is so cool. So to stop that generational, things like the people pleaser, because we do, and I'm hoping those that are listening, if you're doing this, it's not too late to change, right?
And it's so important for us to work on it, right? Because, and I say this to my clients all the time, right? We're going to get pushback from the people that came before us. Because my mom will say to me like, well, I did this. Or my grandma will say, well, I did that and I didn't complain. And it's like, yeah, but I don't want the same like life that you had. Like I want a different life for me and my kids. And I think that, as a little girl, it wasn't so much what my mom said that, had me being like, oh, this, to be a good woman, this is what it is. It's what she did. It's that she never took a break for herself. It's that we always came first. Like it was that she was beyond selfless and ran around like a chicken with her head cut off. So our actions is what's teaching our children that this is how we're supposed to be. And this is what makes you good.
That
right?
is so true. Yeah. The actions. And you're right. Because those actions teach us, because her actions are people pleasing actions, right? Doing for everybody else before doing for self. Right. And so, and that's where I also think that's where the feeling comes up about, oh my gosh, if I go sit in my room and read a book, that's selfish because I'm not sitting out here making dinner, or if I'm not doing laundry, if I decide to take a bath, or if I decide to go away for a girls' weekend. I remember one time my oldest son, and I said, I don't know where you're getting this from, son. I was going to go do something with my friends. And my older son said to my husband, you're letting mom go out and do that? And I looked at him and I go, oh, let's clarify this right now. Your dad is not letting me do anything. I choose to do the things that I want to do. Right. Yeah. And we discuss it. It's just like if I go traveling for business or something, I'm just like, I'm going away here. What's happening in our family that I need to be aware of as it affected, right? Yeah. So we learn, what we're saying, like you said, we saw our moms do all these things and we think we have to, and we have to change that. And it goes back to that 0 to 7 years old, what we're setting up. And I know my 0 to 7 was a lot of people pleasing. I remember one time my poor mom, she had to go pick up my dad at the bar because my dad had too much to drink. So my mom wakes me up and I have to stay in the house and watch my little brother and sister. I think I was like 7 or 8 years old, so it was like, sit here, don't open the door. So all those things, that generational, people pleasing and the mental fitness and things like that come up. And so I wrote that down about those things come up so early. But I want to talk about the infertility piece because I wish I would have known about the EMDR when I went through mine, because, oh my gosh, the thoughts and like I didn't have mental fitness back then. So the thoughts and the the whole thing of why can't I have a child? What's wrong with me? All those things. So walk us through like how the EMDR, how that helped you.
So it was a really beautiful process for me when I actually got into like the processing stage with the person I was working with. We started on like the fear-based memory, like the fear-based, it's not even a memory, but our brain creates its own stories, right? Like we dream up what happens in the future. So that picture of like everything just going wrong is where we started, right? And I was just picturing that. And through it's bilateral stimulation. So that could be tapping or eye movements, whatever works. You're just triggering the right and left side of your brain. Through that, it just made my brain jump to all these other things that were like, because logically I know them, right? So my brain was like, oh, you breastfed your son and like he latched immediately and you breastfed him for 2 years. Like you're friggin' mom champion. Your body doesn't work for you. Like, what is that thought? And then it went to like, as soon as he came out the womb, he was crying and crying and crying. And they put him right next to my face because it was a C-section. I couldn't get up. And immediately he like calmed down and like all of these like positive memories of like, you are a good mom. you got this. Your body is capable. Just came flooding into my brain. And then from there, it was like, okay, my body is broken, didn't feel true anymore. And then we started working on the thought of like, I'm capable. Like I am capable. I'm a good mom. And then when we started focusing on that thought and all the positive memories, it just makes those connections so much stronger. So when those negative thoughts come up, they just automatically feel less true because now I have in my brain these strengthened neural connections that are like, no, you're a good mom. And here are all the facts that show that. And it's just amazing to me because we can know that. But when trauma is stored in our brain, and infertility is a trauma, it really, there are studies that show that it is just as like stressful as a cancer diagnosis to a lot of women because it's so ostracizing to your family, to your friends. Imagine everyone else around you is getting pregnant, having kids. You don't want to talk about it because there's shame attached to it. And now everyone's asking, when are you having kids? When are you having kids? I remember wanting to just sit there and cry. Like, please stop asking me when I'm having kids. I don't know if I'm ever going to have kids. Like, it was just so disheartening. And if all you ever wanted to be as a mom, it's just so part of our identity that it just feels like this major loss and zero control. So it is truly traumatic. And it really affects the way that we see ourselves. And so to be able to take that trauma of like, even I remember just going back the second time for IVF and I had embryos stored. So I didn't even have to do the crazy process again. And I was already, as soon as I walked into the office, getting panic attacks because I was like, I don't want to do this process again. Because there was just so many failed attempts that it's just like, I don't want to go through this again. I don't want to go through this again. So what EMDR does is moving that memory from the fear center of your brain to like long-term storage. So it comes up, you're going to remember it, you're going to have feelings, but it's not pinged as hard so that you don't feel that body stuff. Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense. It also reminds me of my journey. Like when you're talking about, because for the longest time, Chuck and I started trying as soon as we got married for 10 years. And like you're talking about, like he's the oldest of all his cousins. So now over 10 years, his younger cousins are getting married. We're having babies. We're doing baby showers and all that stuff. And I'm like going, I want to go, but I don't want to go. I want to show up, but I don't want to show up, all those feelings. And, and then when we finally got to the point where we said, and we always knew like for us, adoption was going to happen because of our journey. Chuck's biological dad died the day before he was born. So his stepfather raised him. I had an uncle and an aunt that were adopted in my family. So we knew at some point that journey was going to happen, but we didn't know it was going to be the first point, right? So for 10 years, here we are trying. And like you said, I think for 7 years in a row, I was having fibro tumor surgeries. And, and now that we look back, I grew up in North Carolina. So the Camp Lejeune water thing, when we look back, that's definitely tied to me. So I'm tying into that situation. However, you don't know that at the time. So you're like, what's wrong with me? What did I do? All those things you're saying. And then I remember we were telling everybody that we wanted to adopt. So we got the call out of the blue for Matthew. And then I remember we tried to go through infertility treatments with Nate to have him. We didn't have the opportunity to ever store eggs. We never got enough to store. And then they never really took. So when it came to Nate and they did the egg retrieval, they're like, okay, we only had 3 eggs that they could retrieve. That's like your success is really small, right? Yeah. With 3 eggs. So they sent us home. And I remember them calling us and they said, listen, we need to have you come in. And I'm like, oh, I told my husband, that means it didn't work, whatever. And they're in Virginia and Maryland. It's called Shady Grove Fertility. They were freaking the best place for us because we go in and they sit us down and they're like, listen, we know what we do works. And we've decided to do the process called ICSI, which is where they actually put the sperm directly in, right? And Chuck and I looked at each other and we looked at them and go, we can't afford that. Like we had already tapped out of our money. This was the last time we were doing this. And backstory, between adopting Matt and doing this procedure, we tried one other time and it didn't work. And I told my fertility doctor, I'm like, well, we'll just adopt again, right? So I had that, still had that in the back of my mind. So when they tell us they're going to do this ICSI, they said, we don't want you to pay. We're going to gift it to you because we believe in what we do. And so and then they go, but you have to go home and stay on bed rest for 2 weeks. I'm like, I'm in for bed rest, whatever you need me to
Yeah,
do.
whatever you need me to do, I will do whatever you need.
Yeah. And 24 years later, we have our amazing son, Nate, and so, but the trauma, you're like we talked about all those things, like had I thought about, I think for me, without even thinking about that I was doing mental fitness, I think for me, because we had adopted before, I still had that trauma of going, man, I'm never going to have a kid of my own. I'm naturally, I'm never going to have that happen. I mean, Matthew was so much fun. When you looked at Matthew, you could tell we didn't have him. If you looked at it, you could assume, but, and so to have, Nate actually come about, it was beautiful, but all those thoughts, like you said, all those thoughts. And then while I'm pregnant with Nate, I get a fibroid tumor. So after I have Nate, I have to do the hysterectomy, that whole route. So then here you are, you're in your 30s and you're like going, I'm definitely not having any kids of my own, that whole thought process, And so I exactly what you're saying. So if I had like the tapping, which I know today in my, it's kind of funny. I shared earlier in another podcast I recorded with, I shared the story about how had I known about the whole tapping thing, and where I am today, my mental fitness, and how I grew up wanting to be a teacher, but never got to go to school to be a teacher, that now that I know all these things, I get to teach it through having people like you on my podcast to teach others about these amazing things. So we're going to get into your fertility story a little bit more. I don't want to we have something to share it a little bit. If is it allowed to be shared yet? Does your family know?
Oh, I'm pregnant. Yes, everyone knows that I'm pregnant.
Okay.
I'm
all right. So since you already dropped it, I was like, I forgot to ask for you guys. You saw me hesitant. We were like, if you're not watching, we're kind of like lip talking before. So, okay. So let's talk about that now while we're here. So just a little backstory, you guys. I always pre-interview any of my guests that come on. So Jamie and I talked in December, and this is March when we're recording this, and she wasn't feeling well and she thought she had COVID. And so Jamie, what happened? What do you really have?
I'm pregnant. It was really funny because, and I was telling Pearl, I was like, IVF is an expensive journey, girl. You were just saying, we tried for so long to have kids. I was told at 18 I couldn't have kids. I am in like the most stressful year of my life. And in December, I didn't get my period. And I said to my husband, you think I'm pregnant? And he was like, nah, it's just stress. You just missed your period this month. We're not even we literally both were like, not even worth taking a pregnancy test. There's no way we're pregnant, right? And then by January, it didn't come again. And I was like, I think you should buy a pregnancy test. And the first one came up positive. The second one, he was like, do it again. There's no way. We did it again, and they're both positive, and it's a girl. And both my babies were boys before, and I always wanted a baby girl. So I think that kind of even going back to the people pleaser stuff, like I said, this was a stressful year for me. I took on a lot with being a co-owner in a business in Missouri, and a lot of disagreement between me and my business partner. And it was funny, like when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, I really think that God's like, you really stuck at taking care of yourself, but you're a fierce ass mama bear. So I'm going to put a kid in you, and it's going to be your girl. So now your job is to make sure that your stress levels go down and you have no choice. And it's really it's been funny for me. It's been wild. I don't like being pregnant, Pearl. I love babies, but I hate being pregnant. It is a terrible experience for me. I'm always high risk. I've been at the doctor like every other week. I have bleeds going on. I already have gestational diabetes. There's just a lot going on here, but she's healthy. So I'm like, as long as I just eat right and lower my stress, and everything will be fine. It's good, but it's kind of amazing. I feel like God intervened to be like, nope, you've been trying to put yourself first, but I struggle with any action that I take that could hurt someone, whether it's my intention to or not. I really struggle if I know the decision that I'm making for me is going to hurt somebody else. And that's really, where we've been. And getting pregnant, I was like, well, it's not about me anymore. There's a baby in me and I need to lower my stress level. So this is what it is. It's got to be what it is.
And it's all of us, if you want that, we're not saying you need to go get pregnant, but it could happen, right? It's a whole different perspective of how you're taking care of self. But you said something, and now I think that's what happens so much with the people pleaser is we're so afraid that when we do something for ourselves, right, we worry about that other person, how they're going to view us, how they're going to feel. We do that often. And so I remember when I went on my journey to learn to stop saying yes to everything and to stop saying, start saying no and learn to say yes to me. It was even with my kid. I was like, oh my God, my kid's going to think I don't love him because I'm not at the football practice. Right. And I'm like, you know what? I'm showing every week for the football games. I may not be at the practice every day, but I am making it to the football games. And, and that's the showstopper, right? That's when he's really all on. Right. So it's like, I had to give myself grace for that. Or telling a friend that I can't come help them with a fundraiser or something at their home. Right. And having that conversation with myself to say, you're an amazing friend. You show up when you need to show up, and it's okay to say no, right? We have to sage those thoughts because we feel, and like we were saying earlier, it's that whole generational thing that we think we have to, especially as women, we think we have to wear these hats and say, we have to do everything. And that was the one thing I will give myself. When I met my husband, I was like, I hated doing everything growing up. I mean, I was a person who helped my mom with the clothes. I helped cook. Like I was doing all those things. Also I had to wear the tag of you're the oldest, right? You're the oldest. You got to be the example, right? So when I met my husband, I'm like, I don't like to cook. I don't like to clean very much. I don't like to do laundry. I'll clean a house, but you're going to have to help. And literally now, I mean, it used to be, he's retired, so it's shifted a little bit, but it used to be, he would do the laundry and then I would try to cook, but he'd do the laundry, he'd put it in, I'd fold it, he'd cook, I clean up afterwards, right? It just worked as this great team, Yeah. And so that helped me overcome the thought of like, I'm the wife, I'm supposed to do everything. I laid it out right away. This is how I am. In fact, when I dated, because I grew up in a household with military, my dad was in the Marines, and because he was gone so much of my life, that if I dated somebody and they were in the service and I found out, it's like, dude, thanks so much for what you're doing. And I've lived that life. I just can't live it anymore.
Yeah.
So you have to set those boundaries, right? Set those boundaries around that.
Yeah. And we're not really taught to set, if we're raised by people pleasers, we're not taught how to set boundaries. Boundaries are a bad word, like saying no is disappointing someone. And like, how could you be so selfish? And it's really, it's not. When we were talking the last time, maybe it was in my show notes for you, I was talking about how as a people pleaser, right, we try so hard to get everyone to like us. Like everyone has to love us, and, we don't want to hurt anyone else. But what happens a lot of times, and I work with so many clients, and this is my pattern too, everyone can push it down until they can't, right? So then what happens for most of my clients, because they're fighters like me, they are empaths and they push it down. And then one more thing happens and they lose their crap, fly off the handle, and then no one's listening to them because you're irate and just flipped out about, the dishes not being put away. But it's not about the dishes not being put away. It's about the 20,000 other things that happened this month that you didn't talk about. And that's what I love working with clients on, is like, they know they need to have those conversations, but the anxiety, that physical anxiety of, they might leave me, or they're going to be upset with me, or what if they think I'm a bad person, is so anxiety producing for them that they'd rather just stay in the situation where they feel used and abused. And it's not even always that the people around them want to make them feel that way. It's that you're not telling them what you need. So if you don't tell people, this isn't working for me, I'm feeling really burnt out, I need to make sure that I get to the gym twice a week, honey, like I am drowning right now. You don't tell your spouse, your employer, your friends, your family what you need, then they can't help you, And I think the problem with a lot of people pleasers is a lot of us were raised by people who maybe were either super empathic, right? Or we were raised by people who were narcissistic, who made us feel bad when we didn't agree with everything they said and perform to their standards, right? which is even more important then for us as adult people pleasers to learn to set our boundaries, because empaths are like, uh, I don't know what the word is, but they're like, a narcissist will like feed on us because
Yeah.
we just keep giving, and they just keep taking.
Yeah.
And
Oh
then
my
we
gosh.
lose it.
What you're saying is so true, because that's, my family, the people that raised me, they were so young when they got married that they had no clue, right? And
Yeah.
so because one was a narcissist and gaslighter, the other one took that on. And so
Yep.
now as years have gone together and they're no longer together, one still does that and thinks it's okay, and will say, "Oh, you're like so and so," and I'm like going, "No, I don't take this energy on. Like, I don't want your energy. You keep your energy. I'm not going to receive it." Right? That's so hard too. If you're listening to us, that's part of overcoming people pleasing. It's part of the
Yeah.
mental fitness to say, "I'm not taking your energy," and to literally have that stop gap that says, "No, stop. I'm not doing this. I will not accept this energy." And I literally did that. Like, I will not accept this energy. This is not what I accept. And you
Yeah.
can go on and be that way to somebody else, but it won't happen in my world. And you were talking about communicating. That's one of the process. So I have a 6-month program, and one part of the program is our core part, which is communicating our realistic expectations.
Yeah.
Like having that conversation with self to know what I expect for myself, and then be able to voice it with our family, friends, and even our career, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're a professional person.
Yeah.
You have to communicate with them, because when they want you to stay that 50th hour of overtime, you need to be able to say, "I'm out," and be confident that you're not going to lose your job, because we worry about that, right? So
Yeah.
communication is such a big key.
It is so important, because so many people just don't communicate, and it keeps you feeling trapped. And when we stay in that people pleaser mode, and we're so afraid of these people, being upset with us or leaving us or whatever, you know, they're just going to keep using and abusing you. Like, you cannot break that cycle. And especially when I'm working with parents, it's like, you need to learn how to set boundaries and communicate your feelings and needs so that your kids know how to, right? I work with a lot of parents, and they're like, why doesn't my kid talk about their feelings? And I'm like, well, do you ever talk about your feelings? Like, no? Okay. Well, where do you think they're learning that skill from? Like, it doesn't happen overnight. And if we're allowing ourselves to be put in situations where people are putting us down or making us feel bad because we're expressing ourselves, and we tolerate that, we're also teaching our children that that is acceptable behavior. And that is what you do when you love someone. You stay regardless, and that's really damaging. I work with a lot of women who've been in domestically abusive relationships because they feel like their family will not understand why they're leaving. They feel very alone. There's so many factors that play in, but ultimately, because they were raised to believe that they are responsible for everyone else, it has to be their fault. And the abusers know that. So they just keep telling you it's your fault. So it's just so important that if you are a people pleaser, please go get help from somebody. Please, girl, go get help from somebody, because life changes so dramatically when you start seeing your own value and worth.
And I just did a video on this yesterday, about how when you make those changes and you put boundaries up, people look at you so differently, and they like unfriend you or stop following you or don't talk to you, because they don't know how to accept it. But yet they will still watch you to see what you're doing, to see, what you're up to. But it's like, they don't get it that you set those boundaries and cut those ties. And, that's how I grew up. I grew up in a household that, like you were saying, like you said to the parent, well, how are they going to communicate their feelings? I grew up in a household that if my parents were in an argument, they didn't talk, right? They would just not talk. I mean, literally, it was like dead silence in the house. And all of a sudden I come home from school, it's like, oh, they're talking now. I'm like, what happened? Right. And so that's how I grew up. That's all I knew for communication.
Oh, my house was more like everyone screams at each other and gets it all out. And then the next day we pretend everything's fine. Like, we just don't address anything that happened. We all were horribly angry and said horrible things.
Yeah.
And it's just like, we're just going to continue like everything's normal now and not talk about it.
Yeah. And so when I met my husband, we didn't have arguments, but if we had a disagreement, I would just be like, well, I'm just not going to talk to you because that's all I know. And he'd start having conversations for me. Well, this is how I feel about you. And he'd say, and I'm like, stop, that's not what I would say to you. So I learned from him. I give my husband credit for that, to teach me to communicate in our family, in our relationship. Yeah. And then as our kids got older, to watch them see that, like, even our friends go, you two are so crazy. Like, we banter, like we'll have this banter kind of back and forth, but it's fun. It's not, and they make fun of us. But my kids, one of the things, and I've talked about this on the show before, is that if I said or did something, they knew my mom and dad pretty well. They would go, oh, you act like grandma and papa. I'm like going, oh, no. So we came up with a word. And I talked about this in an earlier show with somebody who coaches parents. We came up with a word. It said buffalo. And the reason for the word is so we could have the conversation about, what did I say that made you feel that way? So it allowed them to express their feelings, right?
Without you being super triggered by hearing you're just like your mom, right?
Exactly. So we only have, I can't believe our time. We only have like 10 minutes left. So tell the listeners, we're having so much fun, you guys. This happens. Tell our listeners, what is that client journey like when they come to you?
So it really depends on if they are doing an intensive or if they're a weekly client, right? Intensives would be more like a days in a row that we would meet beforehand and come up with a treatment plan and then just bang out treatment, right? So that's a lot different. It's a lot more intimate. It's a lot more we spend a lot of time together. Weekly clients, it's the same process. It's just drawn out a lot longer because you can't get as much done in an hour a week, right? But essentially you call our office, you put in a consultation request form online if you don't want to talk to a human, and we match you with a therapist that fits your needs. My whole practice specializes in trauma. So I have people that do religious trauma. I have people that do grief and loss. I have people that do perinatal and perinatal depression and postpartum depression and anxiety. I have people that do divorce and domestic violence. So any grief and loss, anything you're calling about, I probably have someone who specializes. And if I don't, I will tell you. Like I've had people call when our grief specialist, Valerie, was on maternity leave, and I was like, she's not back for 3 months. I'm going to connect you with somebody else I know that's good. Because to me, it's really, I want our clinicians to meet with clients that they resonate with, because that makes them do a better job, and that's their wheelhouse and that's what they're good at. And that helps our clients more. And if we can't be the person to help you, I would rather direct you to someone who can. Right. But we do all types of trauma work. We have art therapists and kids, but you come in. If you're doing EMDR, we start in resourcing. So resourcing is basically just teaching them the tools to regulate their own nervous system. So many of my clients who've experienced trauma, be that bullying or domestic violence or whatever it was, have a really hard time bringing themselves back down and being in their bodies. They are very dissociative. So they're up in their head and their thoughts all the time, but they ignore what's going on in their physical body, which actually can cause a lot of health problems, like significant amount of health problems. So I actually was seeing a client who had migraines. It was triggered by an argument she got into her boss that brought her back to her childhood. And she had this persistent migraine for like a month. And we worked on some resourcing so that she can get back in her body and calm herself down. That took a few sessions because we want to make sure that you have a few good ones under your belt that you can use. Because I never, ever want to open someone up, Pearl, and not have them be able to cope. And then after that, we did the processing and her migraine went away. It's a miracle. It's really beautiful treatment, but it really depends on how long it takes, depends on how much you want to work on, how deep you want to go. I'm all about learning more about myself. I've been in therapy forever and I'm still in therapy because I feel like with every new phase of my life, there's new challenges and new triggers that come up for me in ways that I never would have thought were possible. And it's just really powerful to just keep growing and learning about me and who I am at my core. So that's pretty much it. You can reach us at www.liemdr.com. You can also follow my podcast at Good Enough with a Trauma Therapist. And that's about it. We also have a company in Missouri. It will be www.resilient-mo as in Missouri.com. And we have EMDR clinicians there, as well as psychiatrists that prescribe medication. So
and we're going to put all that in the show notes to reach out to you as well. But I love what you brought up too, is like you see a therapist. I think that's so important for those that are listening to understand that it's okay to see a therapist or have a coach or both. Like I have clients that see me as their coach, but they also have a therapist, right? And I have therapists in my back pocket that I refer to all the time. And so I think we've gotten, if we can say, the one good thing for me, I think that's come out of COVID is the awareness of mental fitness, the awareness that it's okay to get help. I think we still have a long way to go on that. I think we have some of our young adults that was through COVID who are trying to cope with it in real life today. I think there's a lot that we still need to do for them. But if you're listening, it's so important that if any of this resonates with you, to reach out to somebody, even if you want to reach out to me through our YouTube or the podcast, on Conversations with Pearl, because it's so important to know you get help. And I've had clients come in here. I'm so proud to say that I've had clients come and work with me, and they may have been working with a coach before. And we do a 6-week, we use the PQ method, the positive intelligence method. And it's a 6-week, but I incorporate it into 10 weeks because I want to talk to before and then after the program. However, I've had people come in, I'm like, so why me? Why work with me? And they're like, because you're real and you're honest. And for me, that's a huge compliment. I want people to know that, from the outside, it might look like I got it together, but look, I just lost my son 18 months ago. I'm 40 years married. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but there's things that come up, and I want you to know that you could trust that I'm going to be honest with you, but I'm also going to push your butt pretty hard to make you do the work.
But I really feel like, everyone should be in some sort of supportive help, even if you take breaks. Like I've taken breaks in my life when I have less stress, but when I need support, I have to go back. But I think so many people look at it's like checking a box, like, oh, I did that thing and now I'll be cured forever. And it's like, that's not true, right? Life is stressful. Life brings us so many challenges that are really hard for our brain to process on our own. And as a therapist, I need a therapist because I can't work through my own stuff. It's hard for me to look at that in an unbiased way, right?
Right.
All of my clients have the same issues as me, and I could tell them all day long, like, oh, here's a tool, here's a tool, here's a tool. But when it comes to me, it seems to just escape my mind. And that's also just normal.
Right.
And it's okay. And we're all a work in progress. And anyone who is feeling like, they haven't met X amount of milestones or whatever they need to be better, or that they're a failure because they're still not cured from the stuff that they struggle with, that's just being a human. We're just learning how to make the best out of every day, guys. That's it.
Yeah. That's so true. What I'm hearing us talk a lot here is like community, right? Having that community. We have our community that's called the Shiro League. I think I mentioned earlier in the episode, where, we get together every Sunday evening, and I created out of what I saw in COVID, some of the craziness happening, trying to balance life while still being at home, with becoming a teacher when you didn't want to be a teacher, all those things that were happening, and having a sense of community. What does community mean to you, Jamie?
Oh, community is so important. So for me, I think when I created my own company, I was very strategic in who I hired, and I'm very picky because it's really about the culture and the community for me. So my team is a very large part of my community. And then I do a lot of networking. I reach out to other people like you, Pearl, that can help me in my journey in podcasting. I have people that have been in the group practice world for 20 plus years that are like mentors to me that I meet with every single week. I just think it's really important because there's so many different areas in our life where we can feel alone, and having that sense of community and teamwork and togetherness just really helps to make me feel like, okay, I'm not alone. Even if I feel alone, I can call this person, this person, this person. I can, I fell down my stairs 2 weeks ago and I'm pregnant. So that was clearly a bad thing. But I swear to my girlfriend came over the next day. One of my employees who I've been friends with since we're 19, was like, do you need me to go grocery shopping? Anything I need to like, my community of people, like in my family, my Aunt Tina came and cleaned my house the next day. Everyone just rallied. And that's because I surround myself with really supportive people, and I'm all about reciprocal relationships. So I help you, you help me. And I don't even have to ask for help. If something happens, they'll just pop up because I'm always the person that's like, how do I help you? And that's, I think, super important, especially for us people pleasers and empaths, is to surround ourselves with people that are like us. Because when you're surrounded by a bunch of takers, it can feel really draining. But if you surround yourself with people with like energy that are also just givers and want to help and want to support you, it's just a beautiful thing, Pearl. I love it. I love the life that I have built for myself. I
love that. I love that. And thanks for sharing that community. And that's truly what I've created. And that's our Shiro League as well. So if you're listening, you want more information on that, I'm going to send you the link. You can come join us one Sundays, Jamie, but it's every Sunday evening from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern. You can just email hello@wsliving.com. That's hello@wsliving.com. Just email the word Shiro and I'll get you the link for Sunday night on Zoom. But we're reaching near the end. And I don't know that I forewarned Jamie, but this could be a surprise for her. But we have our Better Questions, Better Life cards. And so, Jamie, I'm going to shuffle them. You're going to tell me when to stop, and then we're going to read the card. So 1, 2, 3, tell me when to stop.
Oh, stop. I don't.
All right. Your card says, what are my opportunities? What are your opportunities?
Right now?
What are your opportunities for yourself?
For myself. So right now I have the opportunity to allow other people to handle certain things for me that are causing me a lot of anxiety. That's a hard thing as a people pleaser, but after consulting with everyone in my life, it's what I need to do to protect myself, protect my team, and move forward with my own mental sanity. So my opportunity is to delegate and allow others to help me.
And you're right. That's really hard for those of us that are people pleasers. So if you're listening, you're a people pleaser, take her advice and start delegating out right now. So this has been so much fun, Jamie. I'm so glad we got together. And this is not the end. Jamie and I and her team are going to be doing some other things to come. So pay attention and listen. If you're listening to us on the radio show at 360 Talk Radio for Women, you're going to want to keep listening to the Self-Care Sheroes episodes because you might hear a little more from Jamie as well. So I'm so excited to have you part of joining us on this journey. And I just want to remind everybody, as you finish listening to us today, I hope you go have a great day. But I want you to remember that you come into this world, you are this amazing rough oyster on the outside. But as you open up inside, you have this beautiful pearl. And I want you to go find your inner pearl to greatness and make it a great day and be the Shiro you are.